The news and campaign reports with Michael Burke and David Davis.
The Conservatives say Labour's spending plans would cost every taxpayer more than £1,000 a year. Norman Lamont said Labour's manifesto was either fraudulent or unaffordable. Neil Kinnock says the calculations are fantasy by a Chancellor who can't count. Paddy Ashdown said both the main parties' manifestos were weak and timid. Other news, the Zulus march on Johannesburg to demonstrate against the ANC. And a nurse is rescued after 8 days under the rubble of the Turkish earthquake. Good evening. The Conservatives have kept up their attack on Labour's spending and tax plans. They've costed Labour's spending promises, and they say their opponent's manifesto will cost every taxpayer in the land as much as £1,250 a year more. Their calculation is for the last year of a Labour government at this year's prices. They say the manifesto pledges would cost £38 billion, but Labour's alternative budget would raise less than £7 billion. If Labour were to keep their promises, the Tories say, there would have to be a sharp rise in taxes. The Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, said the figures were simply ridiculous, not within a light year of the truth.
The Tories are sticking with their more aggressive tone of recent days. Having described the shadow budget as a way of mugging the middle class, Mr Major led his Treasury team into an obvious attempt to widen the attack on Labour's taxation plans. The Tories believe there won't be any extra growth to improve on their planned public spending increases. And so they argue Labour's manifesto promises could only be met in full by a rise in taxes of £38 billion a year.
This is the true cost of Labour. Labour governments mean higher spending. Higher spending means higher taxes. This is not a hidden agenda. The agenda is all too public. Labour are a threat to the living standards of every family in the land.
Labour regard the Tory move as a clear sign that the attack on the shadow budget has failed. Mr Kinnock considers the £38 billion figure a fantasy.
The commitments that we've made that we can discharge immediately, we will discharge. That is to increase old age pensions and child benefit, to get our recovery programme off the ground, and also to make the commitment to the National Health Service and to education. We've done that in very precise terms in the budget that we published last Monday. All of the other commitments are dependent on growth and to be introduced over the lifetime of a parliament. And that is the honest way to approach it, though I think that Mr Lamont is getting to the stage where he'd have difficulty in recognising honesty if it came up and hit him on the head, which I hope it doesn't.
The Liberal Democrats are the only one of the main parties ready to put up the basic rate of tax. But Mr Ashdown wasn't interested in the argument today.
Oh, I think I'm perfectly happy to leave this ridiculous argument, largely based on misrepresentation to the pair of them. They can fight it out in public or in private any way they like. I have not the slightest intention of paying any attention to either of them.
At their news conference, Labour too were keen to set their own agenda. They renewed their commitment to a minimum wage of £3.40 an hour, comparing it with some of the lowest rates at present being paid.
No civilised or decent society should tolerate such appalling treatment for some of the most vulnerable people at the workplace. Poverty pay is neither the way to an efficient economy nor to a fairer community.
All the parties are keeping a close eye on each other's tactics, and Labour politicians have been as interested as some Tories in how one of the biggest guns in the campaign would be used. This afternoon, in a small hall in Northamptonshire, Michael Heseltine also opened fire on the Labour manifesto.
Short on ideas, wild on tax, £3 million for every word in the document, the most expensive publication in history.
There wasn't the party conference atmosphere, but remembering the last Labour government's winter of discontent, he pulled out all the stops.
I remember the bully boys on our streets. I remember the picket line violence. I remember CND, the so-called peace movement. I remember socialism on the march. And I know what motivates it. It is the politics of envy, the politics of frustration, the politics of intolerance. It is the politics of those who keep the law, only when the law is on their side.
I think this is a mark of just how desperate the Tories have become. They will talk about anything other than their own record, their own programme, their own, quite obviously,